The china plate shattered against the kitchen floor 3 feet from Hannah Owens' worn boots, and she knew without looking up that she would take the blame for it, even though Mrs. Calloway's own trembling hands had dropped it. "You clumsy girl, Mrs. Calloway shrieked, her face flushing crimson beneath her elaborate coiffure. "That plate was imported all the way from Boston. Do you know what it cost?" Hannah kept her eyes downcast, her hands clasped tightly in front of her stained apron. "I am sorry, madam. Sorry. Sorry does not replace fine china." The older woman's voice carried through the spacious house in Amarillo, Texas, where Hannah had worked as a servant for the past 2 years. It was September of 1876, and the late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating the porcelain shards scattered across the polished wooden floor. Mr. Calloway appeared in the doorway, his substantial belly preceding him into the kitchen. "What is all this commotion?" "This worthless girl has broken another plate," his wife declared, gesturing dramatically at the mess. "The third one this month." Hannah bit her tongue against the protest rising in her throat. She had broken exactly 0 plates this month. The first had slipped from Mrs. Calloway's hands when she had been startled by a wasp. The second had been cracked already when Hannah had been ordered to use it anyway. And now this one. "That will come out of your wages," Mr. Calloway announced with finality. "What wages?" Hannah wanted to scream. They paid her barely enough to afford the tiny room she rented above the general store, and with these constant deductions, she would be working for free by month's end. But she simply nodded and reached for the broom. "Leave it," Mrs. Calloway snapped. "I cannot bear to look at you right now. Go fetch water from the well. At least you cannot break that." Hannah escaped into the cooling evening air, grateful for any excuse to leave the suffocating house. She grabbed the wooden buckets from beside the back door and made her way down the dusty path toward the community well at the edge of the Calloway property. The late September air carried the first hints of autumn, though in Amarillo, that meant temperatures might finally dip below blazing. Hannah's dark hair clung to her damp neck, and she could feel the day's sweat and grime on her skin. She was 20 years old, though she felt decades older most days, worn down by constant accusations and the grinding poverty that had defined her life since her parents had died of fever 3 years prior. At the well, she found she was not alone. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, filling his own canteen with water. Hannah had never seen him before, and she would have remembered. He stood well over 6 feet, with muscles that strained against his buckskin shirt. His hair was dark brown and hung past his collar, slightly wild in a way that suggested he cared little for society's grooming standards. A thick beard covered his jaw, and when he turned at the sound of her approach, she saw eyes the color of aged whiskey beneath heavy brows. "Evening," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to come from deep in his chest. "Good evening, sir." Hannah kept her distance, setting down her buckets. She had learned to be wary of men, especially ones she did not know. He stepped back from the well, gesturing for her to go ahead. As she moved forward to lower the first bucket, she stumbled slightly over an exposed root. The man's hand shot out, steadying her elbow with surprising gentleness for someone so large. "Careful there," he said. "Thank you." Hannah quickly pulled away, her cheeks warming. She focused on lowering the bucket into the well's depths, listening to the satisfying splash as it hit water. "You work for the Calloways?" the man asked. Hannah glanced at him, wondering how he knew. Then she remembered her apron, stained with the evidence of a day's hard labor and the direction from which she had come. "Yes, sir. I am their servant." "Yates Conrad," he said, not offering his hand since she was occupied with hauling up the full bucket. "Most folks just call me Yates." "Hannah Owens." She managed to pull the bucket up and poured the water carefully into one of her containers. "You are bleeding," Yates observed. Hannah looked down and saw a thin line of blood trickling down her forearm. She must have cut herself on one of the porcelain shards without noticing. "It is nothing. Cuts can fester out here if you do not tend them properly." Yates pulled a surprisingly clean handkerchief from his pocket and held it out to her. Hannah hesitated, then accepted it with a quiet thank you. She pressed it against the small cut, watching as a small bloom of red stained the white fabric. "I will wash this and return it to you. Keep it." Yates leaned against the well's stone wall, studying her with an intensity that made her nervous. "You are hurt fairly regular working for them." "Just a small cut," Hannah deflected, lowering the second bucket. "That is not what I asked." Hannah's hands stilled on the rope. She looked at this stranger, this mountain of a man who spoke with casual confidence and seemed genuinely concerned about a servant girl he had just met. "I should not speak ill of my employers, even when they do not treat you right. You know nothing about how they treat me. I know you have a fresh bruise on your jaw that is maybe 2 days old. I know that cut looks like it came from broken pottery. I know you are thin in a way that suggests you are not eating regular meals. And I know the Calloways have a reputation in Amarillo for being hard on their help." Hannah's hand flew to her jaw, where Mrs. Calloway had struck her 3 days ago for supposedly tracking mud onto a clean floor. She had thought the bruise had faded enough to hide. "I really must get back." She hauled up the second bucket with more force than necessary, her arms straining. Before she could pour it, Yates had moved to help her, his large hand steadying the bucket as she transferred the water. "How long you been working for them?" he asked. 2 years. "That is a long time to stay somewhere you are not valued. Not all of us have the luxury of choice, Mr. Conrad." Hannah straightened, picking up one of the full buckets. It was heavy, the weight pulling at her shoulder. "Some of us must work where we can find employment." Yates picked up the other bucket with an ease that made it look empty. "I will help you carry these back." "That is not necessary." "Maybe not, but I am doing it anyway." He started walking toward the Calloway house, leaving Hannah to follow with her lighter load. They walked in silence for a moment before Hannah's curiosity got the better of her. "Are you new to Amarillo?" "Just passing through. I have been living up in the mountains west of here, trapping mostly." "Needed to come into town for supplies." "The mountains must be beautiful," Hannah said wistfully. She had lived her entire life in Amarillo and the surrounding flat plains, never venturing beyond the town's limits. "They are. Wild and free. No one there to tell you what to do or blame you for things that are not your fault." Hannah glanced at him sharply. "You seem to have formed quite an opinion about my situation based on very little information." "I am good at reading people. Comes from spending so much time alone, I suppose. When you do talk to folks, you learn to notice the things they do not say out loud." Yates paused as they reached the back door of the Calloway house. "If you ever need help, Hannah Owens, you can find me at the trading post on Main Street for the next few days. After that, I will be at my cabin about 15 miles west, up in the canyon country." Before Hannah could respond, the back door flew open and Mrs. Calloway appeared, her eyes widening as she took in the sight of Hannah standing with a strange man. "Hannah, who is this person? What are you doing entertaining men when you should be working?" "He was helping me carry the water, madam," Hannah said quickly, reaching for the bucket Yates held. Mrs. Calloway's gaze raked over Yates with obvious disdain, taking in his rugged appearance and wilderness clothing. "We do not need help from mountain vagrants. Hannah, get inside this instant, and you, sir, remove yourself from our property." Yates set down the bucket carefully, his expression neutral but his eyes hard. "Madam," he said with a slight nod that held no real respect. Then he looked at Hannah. "Remember what I said. As he walked away, Mrs. Calloway grabbed Hannah's arm and pulled her inside. "What did he say to you? What did he want?" "Nothing, madam. He was just being kind." "Kind?" Mrs. Calloway's laugh was sharp. "Men like that are never just kind, you foolish girl. He probably wanted to lure you away to take advantage of you. You are lucky I came out when I did." Hannah doubted very much that Yates Conrad had any such intentions, but she kept her mouth shut. She had learned that arguing with Mrs. Calloway only made things worse. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of cooking, cleaning, and enduring Mrs. Calloway's increasingly creative complaints. The roast was too dry. The potatoes were undercooked. The tablecloth had a wrinkle. Each criticism was delivered with venom, and Hannah absorbed them all in silence, her mind wandering to strong hands steadying a bucket and kind eyes that had seen her bruises. That night, as she lay in her small rented room, Hannah examined the handkerchief Yates had given her. It was simple but well made, the fabric soft from many washings. She folded it carefully and placed it under her pillow, a small secret comfort in her otherwise cheerless existence. The next morning began as most did, with Hannah arriving at the Calloway house before dawn to light the stoves and prepare breakfast. She was whisking eggs when Mr. Calloway's voice boomed from the dining room. "Hannah, come here immediately." Her heart sank. That tone never preceded anything good. She set down the whisk and hurried to the dining room where she found Mr. Calloway standing beside his desk, his face purple with rage. "Where is it?" he demanded. "Where is what, sir? Do not play innocent with me." "The $50 that was in my desk drawer. It is gone, and you are the only other person who has been in this room." Hannah's blood ran cold. "Sir, I have not taken any money. I would never." "Lies." Mrs. Calloway appeared from the hallway, her face equally furious. "We have given you employment out of the goodness of our hearts, and this is how you repay us, by stealing." "I did not steal anything." Hannah's voice rose despite her best efforts to remain calm. "Please, you must believe me." "The evidence speaks for itself," Mr. Calloway said coldly. "The money was here yesterday morning. Now it is gone. You have been in this room to clean. Who else could have taken it?" "I do not know, but it was not me." Panic was setting in now. $50 was a fortune. If they called the sheriff, she could be arrested, maybe even sent to prison. "Search her," Mrs. Calloway commanded. "Search her room. I am sure we will find the money hidden away." "My room is not even in this house," Hannah protested, but Mr. Calloway was already sending their stable boy to fetch the sheriff. The next hour was a nightmare. Sheriff Morrison arrived, a weathered man in his 50s who had known the Calloways for years and knew Hannah only as their servant. He listened to their accusations with a grave expression, then turned to Hannah. "Miss Owens, did you take the money?" "No, sir." "I swear on my parents' graves I did not." "She is a liar," Mrs. Calloway hissed. "Always has been. Breaks things and denies it, shirks her duties. Now she steals from us." "I will need to search your person and your room," Sheriff Morrison said, not unkindly but firmly. The search of her person revealed nothing, of course, because Hannah had not taken any money. But when the sheriff and Mr. Calloway went to search her room above the general store, Hannah's panic deepened. What if someone had planted the money there? What if this was all an elaborate scheme to be rid of her? She waited in the Calloway kitchen, Mrs. Calloway watching her like a hawk, for what felt like hours. When the men finally returned, Sheriff Morrison was holding a small leather pouch. "Found this hidden under her mattress," he said gravely, opening the pouch to reveal a handful of bills. Hannah's world tilted. "That is not mine. I have never seen that before. Someone must have put it there." "So you are saying someone broke into your room to hide stolen money under your mattress?" Mr. Calloway's voice dripped with sarcasm. "How convenient." "Sir, You are not counting it, Hannah asked desperately, grasping at anything. If it is not the full $50, that proves it is not your money. Sheriff Morrison counted the bills. $43. You see, Hannah said quickly, it is not the same amount. Obviously, you spent some of it already, Mrs. Calloway said triumphantly, or hid it elsewhere. Miss Owens, I am afraid I am going to have to take you into custody, Sheriff Morrison said, reaching for the handcuffs at his belt. No, please, I did not do this. Hannah backed away, her mind racing. This could not be happening. She had survived so much, worked so hard, only to be framed for a crime she did not commit. The front door opened suddenly, and Yates Conrad filled the doorway. His eyes swept the scene, taking in Hannah's terrified expression, the sheriff's handcuffs, the Calloways' righteous fury. What is going on here? His voice cut through the chaos like a knife. This is none of your concern, Mountain Man, Mr. Calloway said dismissively. This girl has stolen from us and she is being arrested as she should be. Hannah, Yates looked directly at her. Did you take anything? No. The word came out as a sob. I swear I did not. Yates turned back to the sheriff. Then there has been a mistake. And how would you know that? Sheriff Morrison asked, his hand still on his handcuffs but not moving to restrain Hannah yet. Because I know Hannah Owens, and I know she is not a thief. You only just met her yesterday, Mrs. Calloway sputtered. You know nothing about her. I know enough. Yates stepped further into the room, his presence seeming to fill the entire space. I know she works hard for people who do not appreciate her. I know she is blamed for things she did not do, and I know she has more integrity in her little finger than most folks have in their whole bodies. This is absurd, Mr. Calloway said. Sheriff, do your duty. But Sheriff Morrison was looking at Yates with a curious expression. You willing to vouch for her character? I am. You have only known her a day, the sheriff pointed out. Some things you know right away. Hannah Owens is no thief. Well, someone took my money, Mr. Calloway insisted. And it was found in her room. How much was supposedly stolen? Yates asked. $50. And how much was found? 43, Sheriff Morrison said. Yates turned to Hannah. You have any savings at all? Hannah shook her head miserably. They barely pay me enough to cover my room and a bit of food. I have maybe $2 to my name. So where would you have spent $7 between yesterday and this morning without anyone noticing? Yates asked the room at large. She could have hidden it, Mrs. Calloway insisted, though her voice had lost some of its certainty. Or, Yates said slowly, someone took that money, planted most of it in Hannah's room to frame her and kept some for themselves. That is a serious accusation, Sheriff Morrison said. No more serious than accusing an innocent girl of theft. Mr. Calloway's face was growing redder. Why would anyone do such a thing? To get rid of a servant they are tired of paying. To avoid any questions about where the money really went. Yates shrugged his broad shoulders. I can think of several reasons. How dare you? Mrs. Calloway's voice rose to a screech. We are respected members of this community. We would never, your stable boy, Yates interrupted, looking at the sheriff. You question him yet? Why would I question Thomas? Mr. Calloway demanded. Because he has been in and out of this house all morning, and he was the one sent to fetch the sheriff. Convenient that he knew just where to go. Sheriff Morrison stroked his jaw thoughtfully. Thomas Cooper has been in some trouble before. Nothing serious, mostly petty theft when he was younger. This is ridiculous, Mr. Calloway blustered, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes now. Let me talk to the boy, Sheriff Morrison said. Before we make any arrests, let me just ask him a few questions. Thomas was brought in from the stables, a lanky 17-year-old with nervous eyes. Under Sheriff Morrison's gentle but persistent questioning, his story quickly fell apart. Yes, He had seen the money in Mr. Calloway's desk. Yes, he had taken it. Yes, he had hidden most of it in Hannah's room because he knew she would be blamed and no one would believe her. The confession spilled out of him in a rush, and with each word, the Calloways' faces grew more shocked. When it was done, Sheriff Morrison clapped handcuffs on Thomas instead, and the boy was led away still stammering apologies. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Mr. Calloway cleared his throat. "Well, Hannah, it seems there was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. 2 years of being blamed for everything, of having her wages docked, of being slapped and berated, and it was all just a misunderstanding." "You are fired," Hannah said quietly. Mrs. Calloway's eyes widened. "I beg your pardon," I said. "You are fired. I will not work for you any longer." The words felt like freedom, even though Hannah had no idea where her next meal would come from or how she would pay for her room. "You cannot fire us, you insolent girl. We are your employers." "Not anymore." Hannah untied her apron and let it drop to the floor. "I quit." She walked out of the house with her head high, Yates falling into step beside her. It was not until they were out of sight of the Calloway property that her knees began to shake. The full weight of what had just happened crashed over her, and she stumbled. Yates caught her, his strong arms steadying her. "Easy now, you are all right." "I have no job," Hannah whispered. "No way to pay for my room, no references. What am I going to do? You are going to come with me." She looked up at him, this stranger who had defended her when no one else would. "I cannot just go with you. I do not even know you. You know I believe in you. You know I see the truth when others do not. And you know that staying in this town, where everyone will remember you as the girl accused of theft, even if it was not true, is not going to get you anywhere good." He was right, but still. "Where would we go?" "My cabin. It is simple but clean, and there is plenty of room. You can stay there while you figure out what you want to do next. No obligations. I will not touch you or pressure you in any way. I just want to help." Hannah searched his face, looking for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. All she saw was earnest concern and a quiet strength that made her feel, for the first time in years, safe. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Yates was quiet for a long moment, his hand still steadying her though she had regained her balance. "I spent 5 years living alone in those mountains," he finally said. 5 years with nothing but my own thoughts and the wilderness. It teaches you things, that much solitude. It teaches you what matters and what does not. And when I saw you yesterday at that well, I saw someone who was being slowly crushed by people who should have valued her. I could not walk away from that. You do not owe me anything." "No, I do not. But that does not mean I should not help when I can." He released her gently and stepped back, giving her space. "The offer stands. My cabin, or I can give you enough money to get to another town, make a fresh start. Your choice." Hannah thought about her options. She could stay in Amarillo, try to find new work with the shadow of accusation hanging over her. She could take Yates' money and flee to some unknown town where she knew no one and had no prospects. Or she could trust this mountain man who had seen her worth when no one else had. "How far is your cabin?" she asked. A slow smile spread across Yates' bearded face. "About half a day's ride. I have never been on a horse." "Then you will learn. Go gather your things. I will get supplies and meet you back here in an hour." Hannah returned to her tiny room above the general store for what she knew would be the last time. She owned so little that packing took only minutes. 2 changes of clothes, her mother's Bible, a small wooden box containing a few precious mementos. She wrapped everything in a worn shawl and tied it into a bundle. The landlord was understanding when she explained she was leaving town. He even returned half of the current month's rent since she had paid in advance. It was only a few dollars, but it felt like a fortune to Hannah. She met Yates at the edge of town as agreed. He had a sturdy horse loaded with supplies and had borrowed a smaller mare for Hannah. He helped her mount, his hands careful and respectful, and showed her how to hold the reins. "Just relax and let her do most of the work," he advised. "She is a gentle creature. She will follow my horse without much guidance." They rode out of Amarillo in the late morning, heading west toward the distant canyon lands. Hannah looked back once at the only home she had ever known, then fixed her eyes forward. Whatever lay ahead could not be worse than what she was leaving behind. The landscape changed gradually as they rode. The flat plains gave way to rolling hills, and the hills grew rockier and more dramatic. Yates pointed out landmarks and told her stories about the land. His deep voice, a pleasant accompaniment to the rhythmic sound of the horses' hooves. They stopped once to rest the horses and eat a simple lunch of bread and cheese that Yates had packed. Hannah's entire body ached from the unaccustomed riding, but she did not complain. This discomfort was nothing compared to the daily misery she had endured with the Calloways. "You doing all right?" Yates asked, watching her stretch her sore legs. "I am fine, just not used to riding." "Your body will adjust. Give it a few days." He handed her a canteen of cool water. "We should reach the cabin before sunset if we keep a steady pace." They rode on, climbing higher into the canyon country. The air grew cooler and cleaner, scented with juniper and sage. Hawks circled overhead, and once Hannah saw a small herd of antelope watching them from a distant ridge. "It is beautiful here," she said softly. "Wait until you see it from the cabin. The view stretches for miles." There was pride in Yates' voice, the pride of a man showing off something he loved. The sun was indeed setting when they finally reached Yates' cabin. It sat in a natural alcove of red rock, protected from the worst winds, with a clear spring bubbling up nearby. The cabin itself was larger than Hannah had expected, built from sturdy logs chinked with clay, with a real glass window and a stone chimney. Yates helped her dismount, catching her when her stiff legs nearly gave out. "Come on. Let me show you inside, then I will tend the horses." The cabin's interior was surprisingly homey. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall. There was a real bed in one corner, a table with 2 chairs, shelves filled with supplies, and even a few books. Everything was neat and well maintained. "You can have the bed," Yates said. "I will make a pallet by the fire. I cannot take your bed. You can and you will. I have slept on harder ground than my own floor." His tone left no room for argument. Hannah set down her bundle, feeling overwhelmed. "I do not know how to thank you." "No need for thanks. Just rest. Tomorrow we can figure out a proper arrangement, but tonight, just rest." While Yates tended to the horses, Hannah explored the cabin more carefully. The books on the shelf surprised her. Poetry, philosophy, even a volume of Shakespeare. She had not expected a mountain man to be a reader. Yates returned with her bundle and his saddlebags. "I will cook us some dinner. Nothing fancy, just beans and salt pork, but it will fill you up." "I can cook," Hannah offered. "You have done so much already. Tonight, you let me take care of things." So Hannah sat in one of the chairs, her body exhausted but her mind racing, and watched this large, capable man move around his small kitchen with surprising grace. He built up the fire, set a pot of beans to heating, sliced salt pork into a skillet. The domestic scene was so at odds with his rugged appearance that Hannah found herself smiling. "What is funny?" Yates asked, catching her expression. "Nothing. I just never imagined a mountain man being so domestic. Living alone means you learn to do everything yourself. Cooking, cleaning, mending, no one else to do it for you." He stirred the beans thoughtfully. "Gets lonely sometimes, though." "Is that why you come to town?" "Partly. Also for supplies I cannot make or trap myself. Salt, flour, coffee, ammunition." He glanced at her. and sometimes to remember what it is like to talk to another person. They ate dinner in comfortable silence, and afterward, Yates showed Hannah where she could wash up using water from the spring. The water was cold but clean, and Hannah felt layers of grime and fear washing away with it. That night, she lay in Yates' bed, wrapped in clean blankets that smelled of sage and wood smoke, and felt something she had not experienced in years: hope. Through the window, she could see 1,000,000 stars scattered across the black sky, more than she had ever seen from town. From his pallet by the fire, Yates' voice came soft in the darkness. "Hannah, you all right?" "Yes," she whispered back. "Thank you, Yates, for everything. Sleep well." And she did, better than she had in longer than she could remember. The next morning, Hannah woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Sunlight streamed through the window, and for a disoriented moment she could not remember where she was. Then memory returned, and with it, a sense of peace. She found Yates already dressed and cooking breakfast. "Morning," he greeted her with a smile. "Sleep well, better than I have in years." Hannah felt shy in the morning light, unsure of her place in this new world. "Good, we need to talk about arrangements." Yates poured her a cup of coffee and gestured for her to sit. "I meant what I said. You are welcome to stay here as long as you want or need. I will not pressure you in any way, but I think we should establish some understanding of how this works." Hannah wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for something to hold. "I do not want to be a burden. I can work. I can cook and clean, and this is not about you earning your keep," Yates interrupted gently. "You are not my servant, Hannah. You are my guest. But if you want to help out, I certainly would not object. Lord knows my cooking is passable at best, and I have been doing my own mending for 5 years. But that is your choice, not an obligation." "What do you want from me?" Hannah asked bluntly. Men do not usually help women without expecting something in return. Yates met her eyes steadily. "I want you to heal. I want you to remember what it is like to not be blamed for everything that goes wrong. I want you to feel safe. That is all. But in time, what happens when you want more than that, then I will tell you. And you will be free to say no, and I will respect that." He served her a plate of bacon and eggs. "I know you have no reason to trust me yet. Trust is earned, so I will earn it if you will give me the chance." They ate breakfast, and afterward Yates showed Hannah around the property. Besides the cabin, there was a small barn for the horses, a smokehouse, a root cellar dug into the hillside. He showed her the spring and the garden plot where he grew vegetables in the warmer months. "Winter comes hard up here," he explained. "We are higher than Amarillo, so we get real snow. I usually stock up on supplies in late fall and then do not go to town again until spring." Hannah questioned. Yates paused. "I suppose that depends on whether you are still here come winter. That is your choice to make." The days fell into a pattern. Hannah did take over the cooking, partly because she enjoyed it and partly because Yates' idea of seasoning was salt and nothing else. She mended his clothes, which desperately needed it, and helped maintain the cabin. In return, Yates taught her to ride properly, to recognize edible plants, to read the weather in the clouds. They talked in the evenings, long conversations by firelight that ranged from the practical to the philosophical. Hannah learned that Yates had come west after his family died of cholera back in Missouri. He had been 23, angry at God and the world, and he had fled to the mountains to escape his grief. "I spent 2 years barely human," he admitted one night, his eyes distant with memory. "Just surviving, not living. Then gradually the wilderness gentled something in me, taught me to appreciate the simple things: a sunrise, a clear stream, the satisfaction of building something with your own hands." "Do you ever regret leaving civilization?" Hannah asked. "Sometimes I miss certain things. Fresh bread from a real bakery, seeing a play or hearing music, but I do not miss the petness, the way people hurt each other over nothing." He looked at her. "The way they hurt you." "The Calloways were not all bad," Hannah said, though she was not sure why she was defending them. "They gave me work when I needed it." "They gave you work and made you pay for it 10 times over in degradation and abuse. That is not kindness, Hannah." She knew he was right. Slowly, in the safety of the cabin and Yates' steady presence, Hannah was beginning to see just how badly she had been treated. The constant accusations, the physical punishments, the way they had undermined her confidence until she believed she deserved no better. "I was so scared all the time," she confessed. "Scared of making a mistake, scared of being hungry, scared of having nowhere to go. The fear just became normal. You do not have to be scared anymore." But fear was not so easily dismissed. One afternoon, Hannah dropped a plate while washing dishes. It did not break, but the sound of it clattering in the basin made her freeze, her whole body tensing in anticipation of a blow or a verbal assault. Yates, who had been sharpening his knife across the room, looked up immediately. "Hannah." "What is wrong?" "I dropped the plate. I am sorry. I will be more careful." The words tumbled out automatically, defensive. Yates set down his knife and came to her side. "Did it break?" "No, but then no harm done." His voice was gentle. "Hannah, look at me." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "You do not have to apologize for small accidents. Plates get dropped. It happens. It does not make you clumsy or careless or any of the things they told you." His large hands cupped her face carefully, his thumbs brushing away tears she had not realized were falling. "You are safe here. I promise you are safe." Something broke loose in Hannah's chest, and she started to cry in earnest, great shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her securely while she cried out years of fear and frustration and pain. "That is it," he murmured into her hair. "Let it out. You have been holding it in too long." When the storm finally passed, Hannah found herself tucked against Yates' broad chest, his arms still around her, his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. She should have felt embarrassed, but instead she felt lighter, as though crying had released something toxic she had been carrying. "Sorry," she mumbled against his shirt. "Stop apologizing." But his voice was warm, not angry. "You needed that." Hannah pulled back slightly to look up at him. His face was so close, his whiskey-colored eyes soft with concern. She could see flecks of gold in his beard, smell the leather and pine scent that clung to him. "Thank you," she whispered. "Always," he replied, and the word felt like a promise. October arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and brilliant autumn colors to the canyon lands. Hannah had been at the cabin for 3 weeks, and it was beginning to feel like home. More importantly, she was beginning to feel like herself again, or perhaps like a self she had never had the chance to be. Without the constant criticism and fear, Hannah discovered she was actually quite capable. She was an excellent cook, creative with the limited ingredients available. She was organized and efficient. And she was smart, something the Calloways had never acknowledged. She started reading Yates' books, and they had long discussions about what she read. Yates was surprised and delighted by her insights, the way she could take a poem or a passage from Shakespeare and find layers of meaning. "You should have had proper schooling," he said one evening as they discussed Hamlet. "You have a real mind for learning." "My parents taught me to read and write, but that was all they could afford," Hannah said. "After they died, there was no time for learning, just work." "Well, you have time now. Read whatever you want from my shelves." But it was not just intellectual companionship that was growing between them. Hannah found herself noticing the way Yates' muscles moved beneath his shirt when he chopped wood. The sound of his laughter, deep and genuine. The way he looked at her sometimes, with an intensity that made her skin warm. For his part, Yates was clearly exercising significant self-restraint. He never touched her beyond what was necessary or appropriate, never said anything improper. But Hannah caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her think he wanted to. The tension built slowly, sweetly, until one evening in late October when everything changed. They had finished dinner and were sitting by the fire. Hannah was mending one of Yates' shirts and he was whittling a new handle for a tool. Outside, the wind howled, the first real cold front of the season. "Storm is coming," Yates observed. "We might get snow tonight." "Snow?" Hannah looked up, excited. "I have never seen real snow. Amarillo gets flurries sometimes, but nothing that sticks. You will see plenty up here. Come winter, we will be buried in it." "Will we really?" The casual use of "we" made Hannah's heart skip. Yates set down his whittling and looked at her directly. "That is up to you. Do you want to stay through winter?" "Do you want me to?" "Hannah, I want you to stay forever, but I am trying to give you time and space to make your own choices." The words came out more intense than he had probably intended, and he ran a hand through his long hair in frustration. "I am sorry. I should not have said that." "Why not?" Hannah set aside her mending. "Why should you not say what you are feeling? Because you have been here barely a month. Because you are still healing from what those people did to you. Because I do not want to pressure you into anything." "What if I want to be pressured?" The words escaped before Hannah could think better of them. Yates went very still. "What are you saying?" Hannah stood, her heart pounding. "I am saying that I notice the way you look at me. I am saying that I look at you the same way. I am saying that when you hold me, I feel safer than I have ever felt in my life, but also something more than safe." "Hannah." Her name was almost a groan. "You do not know what you are asking." "Then tell me. Explain it to me." She crossed the small space between them, standing directly in front of where he sat. "I am not a child, Yates. I am a 20-year-old woman who has survived things that should have broken me. I know my own mind." Yates looked up at her, his hands clenching into fists at his sides as if he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. "If I touch you now, if I kiss you, I will not want to stop. I will want all of you. And you deserve better than a mountain hermit who can offer you nothing but a simple cabin and a hard life. You have offered me respect, safety, kindness. You have seen me when I was invisible to everyone else. That is not nothing, Yates. That is everything." Something in his expression shifted, the careful control cracking. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." He stood slowly, towering over her, but Hannah did not feel intimidated. She felt exhilarated. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite their size and strength. "Hannah," he said softly, "I am going to kiss you now. If you want me to stop at any point, you just say so. All right. All right." He bent his head and pressed his lips to hers, soft at first, questioning. Hannah rose on her toes, pressing closer, and Yates made a low sound in his throat. The kiss deepened, his arms coming around her, lifting her against him. Hannah had been kissed before, clumsy stolen kisses from boys in Amarillo who had thought a servant girl would be easy. This was nothing like that. This was heat and hunger and tenderness all mixed together, Yates' mouth moving against hers with an expertise that made her knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the first moment I saw you at the well." "Really?" Hannah was breathless. "You wanted to kiss a dirty, scared servant girl?" "I wanted to kiss the strongest, most beautiful woman I had ever seen. The dirt and fear were just temporary, but your strength, your spirit, that was real." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring. His hand stroked down her back, careful and respectful even as passion built between them. When he picked her up, cradling her against his chest, Hannah made a small sound of surprise. "Is this all right?" Yates asked, his voice rough. Do you want this? Yes. Hannah buried her face against his neck. Yes, I want this. I want you. He carried her to the bed, laid her down gently. What followed was a revelation. Yates made love to her with a combination of fierce passion and tender care that brought tears to Hannah's eyes. He was patient with her inexperience, showing her pleasure she had not known existed, murmuring endearments against her skin. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the blankets, the fire burning low, the wind still howling outside. Hannah felt transformed, claimed, cherished. I love you, Yates said into the darkness. I know it is soon. I know I should wait and court you properly. But I love you, Hannah Owens, and I need you to know that. Hannah turned in his arms to face him. I love you too. I think I have since you defended me to the Calloways. Maybe even since you steadied me at the well and saw my bruises. Marry me. It was not a question but a statement, urgent and sure. Yes, Hannah answered without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. They married in Amarillo 2 weeks later, with the circuit preacher officiating and a few of Yates' trading partners as witnesses. Hannah wore a simple blue dress that Yates had bought her, the first new dress she had owned in years. She felt beautiful in it, especially with the way Yates looked at her. The Calloways were not at the wedding, though word had reached them. Hannah heard through the storekeeper that Mrs. Calloway had declared the marriage scandalous and improper, a servant girl marrying above her station. Hannah did not care. Let them think what they wanted. After the ceremony, Yates took her hand and led her back to their horses. Ready to go home, Mrs. Conrad. Hannah smiled at the sound of it. Yes, let us go home. Winter did come hard to the canyon lands, just as Yates had warned. By December, snow lay thick on the ground and they were effectively cut off from town. But the cabin was warm and well stocked, and Hannah had never been happier. She and Yates settled into married life with surprising ease. They worked together maintaining the cabin and animals, read together in the evenings, made love at night while wind howled around their snug home. Yates taught Hannah to track animals in the snow, to set snares, to recognize the signs of an approaching storm. One evening in January, as they lay in bed after making love, Yates propped himself up on one elbow to look at her. Are you happy, Hannah? Truly happy? More than I ever thought possible. She traced the line of his jaw with one finger. Why do you ask? Because I know this life is hard. Isolated. You are cut off from other women, from society. I worry sometimes that I was selfish bringing you here. Yates Conrad, you are the least selfish man I have ever known. Hannah pulled his face down to kiss him. You gave me a choice. You give me choices every day. That is the opposite of selfish. I just want you to have everything you deserve. I have everything I need. I have you. But in February, Hannah discovered she had something more. She had missed her monthly courses twice now, and her breasts were tender. She recognized the signs from watching other women in Amarillo. She was carrying Yates' child. She told him one evening after dinner, simply and directly. I am with child. Yates dropped the cup he had been holding. It clattered to the floor, coffee spilling everywhere, but neither of them moved to clean it up. You are sure? His voice was hoarse. As sure as I can be without a doctor. All the signs are there. Yates crossed to her in 2 long strides, fell to his knees in front of her chair and pressed his face against her still flat stomach. A baby. We are going to have a baby. Hannah stroked his long hair, her heart overflowing. Are you happy? He looked up at her and there were tears on his face. Happy does not begin to cover it. Hannah, you have given me everything. A reason to come down from the mountain, a home instead of just a cabin, and now a family. He stood and pulled her up into his arms, kissing her deeply. I love you so much. The pregnancy progressed normally, though Yates fretted constantly. As spring arrived and the snows melted, he insisted they go to Amarillo so a doctor could examine Hannah. The doctor pronounced her healthy and estimated the baby would arrive in early September. "You should stay in town," Yates said as they left the doctor's office. "Be near medical help when the time comes." "Absolutely not," Hannah said firmly. "I am not spending the summer in Amarillo being gossiped about. I am going home with you." "But if something goes wrong, then we will deal with it. Women have been having babies in remote places since the beginning of time." She softened her tone. "I know you are worried, but I am strong. The baby is strong. We will be fine." Yates was not entirely convinced, but he knew better than to argue with his wife when she had that particular set to her jaw. They returned to the cabin, and Hannah spent the summer preparing for the baby's arrival. She sewed tiny gowns and blankets, and Yates built a beautiful cradle from smooth pine. In late August, Yates brought a midwife up from Amarillo, an experienced older woman named Mrs. Peterson who agreed to stay through the birth. Hannah was grateful for her presence, especially when labor started on a hot September afternoon. The birth was long and difficult. Hannah labored through the night, Yates holding her hand, wiping her forehead, murmuring encouragement. When their son finally arrived with the dawn, his cries strong and healthy, Yates wept openly. "A boy," Mrs. Peterson announced, laying the baby on Hannah's chest. "And a big one, too. Good job, Mama." Hannah looked down at her son, his tiny face red and scrunched, his fists waving, and felt a love so fierce it almost hurt. "Hello, little one." Yates leaned over them both, his large hand carefully cradling the baby's head. "He is perfect. You are perfect." He kissed Hannah's sweaty forehead. "Thank you." They named him Daniel, after Yates' father. Daniel Conrad was a healthy, hungry baby who quickly became the center of their world. Yates was a devoted father, patient with night wakings and dirty diapers, endlessly entertained by every small noise and expression Daniel made. Hannah recovered well from the birth, and soon their life found a new rhythm, one that included a baby's cries and laughter. She loved watching Yates with their son, the way such a large, strong man could be so gentle with something so small. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Daniel grew into a bright, adventurous toddler, then a curious little boy. When he was 3, Hannah became pregnant again, and this time she delivered a daughter they named Sarah, after Hannah's mother. Their family grew to 4, and then 5 when another boy, Matthew, arrived 2 years after Sarah. The cabin that had once housed only Yates now rang with children's laughter and the chaos of family life. Yates expanded the cabin, adding rooms so everyone had space. He taught Daniel to track and hunt, read stories to Sarah, carried Matthew on his broad shoulders. He was still the same strong, protective man Hannah had fallen in love with, but fatherhood had added new dimensions to him, softened some edges while strengthening others. Hannah bloomed in motherhood. She was patient and loving but firm when needed. She taught her children to read using Yates books, to cook and garden, to appreciate the beauty of the wilderness that was their home. And she made sure they knew the value of kindness, of seeing people for who they really were rather than what others said about them. Sometimes when the children were asleep and she and Yates sat by the fire like they had on that first night, Hannah thought about how different her life might have been. If Yates had not been at the well that day, if he had not seen the truth, if he had not taken her away. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, catching her reflective expression. "Just how lucky I am, how lucky we are. I am the lucky one." He pulled her close and she settled against his chest, fitting perfectly as she always had. "You were the bravest thing I ever found in these mountains." "I was not brave. I was terrified. You were brave enough to trust me, to take a chance on a wild mountain man you barely knew, to build a life out here in the middle of nowhere. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. That takes real courage. Hannah had to admit he might be right. It had taken courage, but it had been worth it, worth every moment of uncertainty and fear, because it had led her here. To a home filled with love. To children who would never know what it was like to be blamed for everything, who would grow up knowing they were valued and cherished. To a husband who saw her, truly saw her, every single day. "I love you," she murmured against his chest. "I love you too. Always have, always will." Years continued to pass. Daniel grew into a young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's quick mind and kind heart. Sarah was spirited and bright, full of questions and laughter. Matthew was the peacemaker, gentle and thoughtful. The children eventually grew up and made their own paths. Daniel married a girl from Amarillo and took over a ranch nearby. Sarah became a teacher, passionate about education because her mother had taught her the value of learning. Matthew followed his father's footsteps into the mountains, becoming a guide for hunters and traders. Hannah and Yates grew old together in their cabin, their hair going gray, their faces weathering like the rocks around them. But their love never weathered. If anything, it deepened with time, roots growing stronger and reaching deeper. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Yates took Hannah's hand and led her to the well where they had first met. It was still there, though Amarillo had grown around it, becoming a proper town with schools and churches and even a railroad station. "I was standing right here," Yates said, gesturing to the spot, "filling my canteen, and then you came walking up looking tired and scared and so beautiful it hurt to look at you." "I was not beautiful. I was dirty and bruised and defeated. You were beautiful." He cupped her face, the same gesture he had made so many times over the years. "You are still beautiful, and I thank God every day that I was here, that I saw what no one else could see." Hannah stretched up to kiss him, there beside the well where it had all started. "Take me home, Yates." "Always, my love, always." They returned to their cabin in the canyon lands, to the home they had built together. And there, surrounded by the wild beauty of the mountains, visited often by their children and eventually their grandchildren, Hannah and Yates lived out their days in the kind of happiness that only comes from truly being seen, truly being valued, truly being loved. Hannah never forgot the scared servant girl she had been, blamed for everything, crushed beneath the weight of others' cruelty. But she also never regretted leaving that girl behind, not when Yates had given her the chance to become so much more. Not a servant, not a scapegoat, but a partner. A wife, a mother, a woman who was valued for exactly who she was. And Yates never regretted coming down from his mountain that day, never regretted defending a woman he barely knew, never regretted offering her a way out. Because in saving her, he had saved himself, finding purpose and joy and love in the place he had least expected it. Their story became a legend in Amarillo, the tale of the mountain man who saw the truth when no one else would, and the servant girl who was brave enough to accept the freedom he offered. Parents told it to their children as a lesson about looking beyond surface appearances, about standing up for what is right even when it is not easy, about the transformative power of seeing and being seen. But for Hannah and Yates, it was not a legend. It was simply their life, their love story, written not in grand gestures but in small daily choices. The choice to trust, the choice to defend, the choice to love. And those choices, made over and over again through the years, had built something more lasting than any mansion in Amarillo, more precious than imported china or social standing. They had built a home. They had built a family. They had built a life of freedom and love in the wild mountains. and it was more than either of them had ever dreamed possible on that September day in 1876, when their eyes first met beside a simple well. And every night, as they lay in their bed with the stars visible through the window and the sound of the wind in the canyon, they thanked whatever providence had brought them together. Because some people spend their whole lives searching for someone who truly sees them. Hannah and Yates had found it in each other, and that made all the difference. The years turned to decades, and eventually, age caught up with them as it does with everyone. Yates' strong body began to slow, his muscles still there, but not as quick as they once were. Hannah's hands developed arthritis, making sewing difficult. But they faced aging as they had faced everything else, together. When Yates passed away at the age of 78, surrounded by his family in the cabin he had built, his last words were to Hannah. "I will wait for you," he whispered, his hand still holding hers. "Wherever I am going, I will wait." Hannah lived another 2 years without him, cared for lovingly by her children but never quite whole without her other half. She spent her days in the cabin filled with memories, reading the books they had read together, sitting by the fire where they had shared so many evenings, sleeping in the bed where they had loved and laughed and raised their family. When her time came, she went peacefully in her sleep, a smile on her face. Her children found her in the morning, lying in bed with one hand stretched out to the empty space beside her, as if reaching for someone they could not see. They buried her next to Yates on a hill overlooking the canyon, where the view stretched for miles just as he had once promised. And if love can transcend death, then surely Hannah and Yates found each other again, reunited in whatever comes after, their souls intertwined as their lives had been. Their grandchildren told the story to their own children, and those children to theirs, until Hannah and Yates became part of the fabric of family history. The servant girl who was blamed for everything, and the mountain man who saw the truth. The love that started with a handkerchief and a kind word and grew into something that shaped generations. Because that is what true love does. It does not just change the two people involved. It ripples outward, affecting children and grandchildren, creating patterns of kindness and respect that echo through time. Hannah and Yates had broken the cycle of cruelty that might have continued through Hannah, had she been broken by it. Instead, they had created a new legacy, one of seeing past surfaces to the truth beneath, of defending the defenseless, of loving with fierce devotion and gentle care. The cabin still stands in the canyon lands, preserved by the family as a memorial. Visitors can see the bed where 3 children were born, the fireplace where countless evening conversations took place, the shelves still holding the books that sparked so many discussions. They can walk to the spring where Yates first brought Hannah, stand in the spot where she realized she was finally, truly safe. And sometimes, locals say, on quiet evenings when the wind whispers through the canyon, you can almost hear them. Laughter. A deep voice rumbling in conversation. The soft murmur of endearments. The sounds of a love that built a home, raised a family, and ultimately became immortal not through fame or fortune, but through the simple, profound act of 2 people truly seeing each other and choosing love. Hannah Owens Conrad and Yates Conrad. A servant girl and a mountain man. 2 souls who found each other in the vast wilderness of the Texas plains and built something that lasted long after they were gone. Their story is a reminder that everyone deserves to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. And that sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is accept the hand that reaches out to pull us from the darkness into the light. Their love story was not perfect. There were hard times, difficult winters, sick children, the normal struggles of life. But through it all, they had each other. They had chosen each other on that day beside the well, and they continued choosing each other every day after. until death parted them, and then, if the stories are true, beyond even that. In the end, perhaps that is all any love story really is. A choice, made over and over, to see and be seen, to value and be valued, to love and be loved. Hannah and Yates made that choice, and in doing so, they created not just a marriage but a legacy. A testament to the truth that love, real love, has the power to transform everything it touches. And so their story ends not with sadness but with celebration. Celebration of a life well lived, of love well given, of a truth well seen. The servant girl was blamed no more. The mountain man found his purpose. And together they built something beautiful that endures to this day, a reminder that seeing the truth and acting on it, even when it is difficult, even when others do not understand, is always worth it. Always and forever worth it.